There are moments when the line between the living and the gone seems to be becoming thin. Corpses move on their own. Morgue cameras show the unthinkable. And lifeless figures appear to breathe again. These are the horrific times when souls decided not to leave their bodies and enter the other world. In the Philippines, a morgue camera captured footage that nobody in that facility could easily explain. A man laid completely motionless on a stretcher, then his upper body shifted slightly. It could have been dismissed as a camera artifact until one foot began moving in a slow, continuous motion, as if searching for the floor. Moments later, his entire body jerked. The clip ended there, cutting off before anything else could be seen. Doctors pointed to muscle reflex as a possible cause, but the footage didn't look like a reflex. It looked like someone trying to wake up. Final goodbye. A family had gathered to say their last farewells when one relative stepped forward for a final touch when something out of this world happened. Suddenly, the person in the coffin stirred. Slowly, visibly, in front of everyone standing in that room, grief shifted into something between terror and disbelief in a matter of seconds. Bodies prepared through standard funeral procedures undergo processes that make movement essentially impossible under normal circumstances, which raises the question of whether this individual had been brought directly to burial without those steps, or whether what happened in that room belonged to a category that preparation and procedure simply can't explain. Bolting morgue. A doctor and a colleague were wheeling a body through the morgue entrance when something horrific took place. The body sat up. Both men ran. The security camera cut out seconds later, leaving the footage frozen on an empty hallway. No follow-up was ever released by the facility, and no official statement explained what the camera had captured or what was found when someone eventually went back inside. The clip circulated widely, and the question it left behind wasn't whether the person had come back to life, it was what exactly had come back. The lifted shadow. Cultures across centuries have described the soul as something that physically separates from the body, visible, drifting, and briefly free. A factory worker sleeping outside gave a camera an unexpected chance to document exactly that. As he slept, a dark, shadow-like shape lifted slowly from his chest, hovered just above him, then sank back in as his body jolted awake. Sleep paralysis produces vivid internal experiences, but it doesn't typically produce a visible, external shape above the body. Whatever rose from that man's chest and returned, it was caught clearly enough that the footage has never been satisfactorily explained away. Deceased movement. A funeral home worker had been recording the preparation process at the family's specific request. Midway through, the arm of the man on the table moved. Not a drift, not a settling, it moved toward him, as though reaching. He stepped back. The arm rose again. He picked up the camera and left the room without completing the preparations. The footage was submitted along with his account. Experts reviewed it and pointed to late-stage muscular activity, a real phenomenon with documented medical basis. The worker didn't dispute the science. He simply said that knowing the explanation and being alone in that room when it happened were two entirely different things. African ritual. Certain funeral traditions practiced across parts of Africa carry weight that outsiders rarely understand. In one recorded ceremony, a man performing a ritual on the lower body of the deceased applied pressure in a specific way, and the body jolted upright, eyes opening wide. The people surrounding the moment erupted. Ancient oral traditions in several African cultures describe specific ritual knowledge capable of briefly recalling the soul to the body after passing. Whether this was a performance, a genuine expression of that tradition, or something that crossed a line most people don't believe exists, the footage doesn't offer a comfortable answer. Too intentional. A morgue worker recording casually while watching over a body wasn't paying close attention to the camera, but the camera was paying attention. The body's fingers moved, not a soft tremor. but a slow, deliberate curl of the hand that lasted long enough to be unmistakable. The head followed with a brief turn. Postmortem movement is a documented medical reality. Gases, settling tissue, and residual electrical signals in muscle can all produce motion after passing. A paramedic confirmed as much when the footage spread.
What you just saw actually happens quite commonly, and these movements do not come from the brain, they come from the spinal cord. And let me explain. Even after the brain has permanently stopped working, the spinal cord can still generate automatic reflexes for a period of time, and it does not need the brain to produce very basic movements. And these movements can happen on their own or after stimulation, like somebody trying to reposition the body, and they can appear hours or sometimes even a day later.
Knowing the science behind it doesn't make it easier to watch a hand move inside a morgue. It just gives you something to repeat to yourself afterward. Pulled under. Folklore across dozens of cultures carries warnings about leaning too close to an open grave. At one burial, a man stepped forward to place a cross on the coffin and slipped straight in. Wet mud was the immediate explanation until the footage was slowed down. Frame by frame, a hand-like shape emerged from the disturbed earth beside him, pressing him at the exact moment he fell. Locals who witnessed it didn't reach for explanations. They said what people in that community have always said: an open grave belongs to whoever is already in it. Two events. Late one night in a California hospital morgue, a body lying on a stretcher shifted upward at the torso as though attempting to rise. Security staff noted the time and logged it. Later that same night, cameras in the adjacent ward recorded a smoky, human-shaped figure moving slowly across the room before fading near the far wall. Staff who reviewed both recordings back-to-back noticed the timing. The body had moved first. The figure appeared after. Whether the two events were connected or coincidental, they occurred in the same building within hours of each other, and no single explanation has been offered that accounts for both. Last look. Friends had gathered to say their final farewells when someone noticed the eyes of the man in the coffin slowly opening. For a few seconds, he looked out at the room at the people who had come for him before his eyelids gently closed again. Viewers online pointed to ocular muscle relaxation as a known post-mortem occurrence, a documented reflex with a clinical explanation. His family didn't find that explanation particularly comforting or complete. Across many traditions, there are accounts of the recently passed making a single deliberate gesture before fully departing. His family believed this was his. One look back before leaving for good. Grave voice. In Idaho in 2024, a man visiting his late wife's grave heard something that stopped him completely, crying faint at first, then unmistakable coming from somewhere beneath the ground. He moved toward it slowly, calling out, checking if someone nearby needed help. The sound led him directly to one of the graves. He looked through a narrow gap and saw nothing. The crying continued for a moment, then stopped. He posted the audio online without much commentary. Paranormal researchers who study residual hauntings have long documented sound phenomena in burial grounds, voices, weeping, and footsteps that recordings pick up long after any living source has gone. Rising corpse. One of our subscribers shared this video with us, and it is horrific enough to shock anyone. A woman appeared to wake inside her own coffin, eyes open, staring directly at the camera as her daughter rushed forward in panic. When the lid was lifted and she was placed on the floor, she seemed still. Then, as her daughter leaned in, she sat upright and spoke in words no one in the room could understand before lying back down. The clip looked real, but when we dug in, we found out that it was a prank. The account belonged to Arman Salon, a TikTok creator with an established reputation of staged horror content. The footage was a performance. The panic it produced, however, was entirely real. Wiping tears. As a man was sitting at a church funeral, he felt uneasy, but couldn't explain why. Something about the open casket in front of him didn't feel right, so he quietly took out his phone and started recording. What the camera caught was deeply unsettling. The woman lying inside the coffin appeared to be moving her hand toward her face, fingers slowly shifting as though wiping something away. He was convinced she had come back. Forensic specialists have noted that certain post-mortem muscle contractions can produce deliberate-looking movement hours after passing, but watching it happen inside a coffin at a funeral is an entirely different experience. Sliding coffin. In Arizona, a funeral home had a quiet night. No staff in the main hall, no visitors, no sound. Then the surveillance footage showed one coffin begin to slide, slowly, steadily, away from its position along the wall, moving as though guided by hands the camera couldn't see. No wires, no airflow, no mechanical explanation was found when staff reviewed the tape. Workers who watched the footage didn't reach for rational answers. People who work around the recently departed long enough tend to develop a different relationship with what's possible in those rooms, and not one of them suggested it was a glitch. The child noticed it. During a funeral, while adults stood around the coffin lost in grief, a child noticed something on the surface of the casket that nobody else seemed to see. A thin, thread-like shape was moving, wriggling slowly along the wood before slipping back inside the moment the boy reached for it. The camera caught it. No adult in the room reacted because no adult appeared to notice. There's a long-standing belief across many cultures that children perceive presences that adults have long since learned to filter out. Whatever was moving along that coffin, it only revealed itself to the one person in the room, still young enough to look without doubt. Chilling incident. CCTV footage from a Russian morgue captured something that medical staff couldn't immediately process. A man lying beneath a white sheet, officially declared no longer alive, slowly raised one hand. He pulled the cloth from his face, looked around the room, and after a long moment pushed himself upright, gripping the edge of the stretcher as his legs struggled beneath him. He had been in that room alone. The footage was reviewed multiple times before anyone acted on it. Cases of mistaken declaration of passing are rare but documented, particularly following certain cardiac events. Whether this man survived, and what he experienced in that room before waking, was never publicly confirmed. Rising mist. In 2017, a hospital security camera captured a moment that spread across every paranormal forum online within days of surfacing. A body lying still on a stretcher released what appeared to be a mist-like shape, rising slowly from the chest upward, drifting for a moment before dissolving into the air above. The footage quality was enough to rule out obvious lens artifacts. Paranormal researchers who analyzed the clip noted that the shape maintained a consistent upward trajectory, rather than dispersing randomly as vapor or condensation typically would. For everyone who watched it, the unsettling part wasn't the mist, it was how purposeful the movement looked. The empty bed. In a hospital ward in Tirana, something drew a patient's attention to a bed across the room. The mattress was shifting, sinking, and rising in a slow, uneven pattern, the way it would under the weight of a body that wasn't there. The bed was empty. Staff who witnessed it in person couldn't immediately explain it, and air pressure beneath the mattress was the explanation that circulated afterward. But nurses who have spent long hours in overnight wards will often say privately that certain beds in certain rooms carry something that shifts, changes, and logical explanations aren't fully clear. This appeared to be one of them. The waving hand? At a church funeral in Indonesia in 2023, the service had been quiet and still until someone noticed movement inside the coffin. The body, wrapped and lying flat, raised one hand slowly and moved it in a gentle wave. People in the room looked at each other before looking back, needing confirmation that they'd all seen the same thing. Scientists pointed to gas movement through post-mortem muscle tissue as a plausible mechanism. Those who were standing in that church when it happened weren't thinking about muscle tissue. They were thinking about whether the person had come to say goodbye or something else. Saint's shadow. Inside a temple in Sahuayo, Michoacan, Mexico, a Facebook user took a photo near the display honoring Saint Jose Sanchez del Rio. Nothing seemed unusual when the shutter clicked, but reviewing the image later, something stood out immediately. A dark, human-shaped shadow loomed directly behind the saint's likeness, solid enough to have depth, positioned too deliberately to read as a stray reflection. He confirmed no one else was standing there. Those familiar with the site believe the martyr's presence never fully left that temple, and whatever the camera caught, it was standing exactly where a guardian would stand. Witch's ground. While exploring a New Mexico cemetery known locally for its connection to old ritual practices, a couple weren't expecting to find anyone else there at night. But pacing through the dark, muttering under her breath, was a bent, elderly woman with wild, tangled hair. The woman filming called out a warning to keep distance. The figure turned hostile immediately, voice rising into a scream before launching herself toward the camera. The footage ended there. Locals who heard about it weren't surprised. That ground had been used for dark practices, and the general understanding was that whoever or whatever was left guarding it did not welcome visitors. Late shift terror. Working alone in a hospital late at night is unsettling under any circumstances. This particular worker had done it enough times that it had become routine until the body on the stretcher sat upright. The CCTV caught the full moment, including the instant he found what was happening and ran. The clip spread rapidly, and the reaction alone was enough to silence most arguments about staging. Post-mortem spasms are real and documented, capable of producing sudden movement in recently passed individuals. But a full, upright sit, at that hour, in that room, with no one else present, that's a different category of experience entirely. Grim Reaper. Nurses monitoring a patient from the station noticed something on the camera feed that made them move immediately. A mist had appeared near the bedside, shifting between light and dark as it drifted slowly to one side. They rushed to the room. By the time they got through the door, the patient had already gone. The footage circulated widely, drawing comparisons to historical accounts of the Grim Reaper, a figure reported in hospitals across different countries and centuries, always described the same way. Whether the mist was atmospheric or something else, it arrived at the exact moment it needed to. Moment of return. CCTV footage from inside a room captured something that spread quickly once it reached the internet. A man was lying asleep when a dark, humanoid shape rose slowly from within him, sitting upright before ascending steadily toward the ceiling and disappearing from frame. The uploader never confirmed whether the man had passed away during the recording or simply slept through it. That detail became the center of everything. Certain spiritual traditions hold that the soul separates from the body during deep sleep, returning before waking. If that's true, this footage may have caught the moment of return, the shape descending just before the man stirred. Hovering shape. A pedestrian recorded the aftermath of a road accident and captured something he hadn't expected to see. The man who had been struck lost consciousness almost immediately, despite the impact appearing relatively minor. As the camera continued rolling, something appeared beside the body, a dark, swirling shape, hovering low and close, moving in a slow, circular pattern that didn't match any wind or exhaust visible in the frame. The pedestrian uploaded the clip with a single question attached. He couldn't determine whether what he was watching was something arriving to collect or something trying desperately to stay. The Crying Ghost.
You alright? You okay?
Walking past a burial ground in Idaho, a man heard a woman crying. The sound was clear enough that he followed it, calling out to check if anyone needed help.
You okay?
It led him away from the graves and toward an abandoned, damaged car sitting just beyond the boundary of the site. Nobody was inside, nobody was nearby. The voice had already gone. He posted the footage online and called it the Crying Ghost, and locals who responded in the comments recognized the location immediately. That stretch near the burial ground had been connected to reports of a similar sound for years, always near the same abandoned car. Visiting mother. Sometimes, it's better not to record anything at all. A woman setting up a small memorial altar for her recently passed mother decided to film the moment the photographs arranged carefully, the quiet act of remembrance. The recording looked calm and undisturbed while she filmed. It was only when she played it back that she noticed it. A dark shadow swept across the altar, covering it entirely for a brief moment before clearing. She hadn't seen anything while it happened. That detail stayed with her more than the shadow itself. She had been standing right there, looking directly at the altar, and had seen nothing. Watching the footage, she didn't look for another explanation. She already knew what she believed it was. Cemetery Guardian. In Colorado, a visitor to a cemetery filmed something near one of the graves that took a moment to fully register. A humanoid figure sat low to the ground with pointed ears, curved horns, and legs that appeared partially transparent against the dark grass. Its face couldn't be seen clearly. When a car passed on the road nearby, the figure raised both hands and moved them in slow, deliberate patterns before fading from view. Demonologists who study graveyard phenomena have documented similar accounts across burial sites in the American Midwest. Figures, described as threshold guardians, said to inhabit the boundary between burial ground and open land, and highly sensitive to intrusion. Beneath the cloth. A video posted online showed the interior of a glass front mausoleum, filmed through the outer pane. Inside, a cloth draped across the space began shifting, not falling, not settling, but moving with a slow, deliberate motion, as though something beneath it was repositioning. The person filming didn't appear to notice at the time, keeping the camera steady without reacting. It was only after the clip was uploaded that the movement became the entire conversation. The mausoleum appeared undisturbed from the outside. No ventilation, no visible cause. Whatever was adjusting that cloth was doing it from within a sealed space, and it didn't appear to be finished. Grave hand. Villagers near a cemetery in India had been hearing unusual sounds after dark for several nights before a group finally decided to investigate together. What they found at one of the graves stopped them where they stood. A dark, non-human hand was pushing out from the earth fingers, unlike anything they recognized, reaching upward from the opening of the grave. One man stepped forward, pressed his palm firmly over the gap, and began reciting holy verses without stopping. Slowly, the hand pulled back into the ground, and the opening went still. Nobody in that group returned to that cemetery after sunset, and nobody who heard the account argued with their decision. Jim's return. Jim Woodford described the moment his body stopped responding as the beginning of something he had no framework for. He found himself in vast fields of light, surrounded by colors he couldn't name, feeling a peace that seemed to have weight and presence. 3 figures he understood as angels guided him forward, and then he encountered someone he recognized not by appearance, but by an overwhelming sense of knowing. He said Jesus asked him quietly what he had done with his life. Jim had no answer, only the feeling of complete love and forgiveness pouring from that gaze. He said he wanted to stay. He was told gently that he had something left to share.
I was looking at none other than Jesus Christ, the Son of God. And he looked at me with those violet eyes. He smiled at me. He knew me. I saw such intense love and forgiveness for me.
The Collector. Churches carry their own kind of weight, but some believe that the funerals being carried draw more than just the grieving. During a ceremony in Nigeria, as a family member stood speaking her farewell, the camera behind her caught something moving through the frame. A dark, humanoid shadow passed directly in front of her, arms spread wide, moving with deliberate slowness before the footage cut out entirely. Locals who saw the clip didn't reach for scientific language. Certain communities across West Africa carry long-standing accounts of presences that appear specifically at moments of passing figures said to arrive not as intruders, but as escorts, there to collect what has already been promised. Heavenly light. Heidi Barr was 16 when a riding accident pulled her out of her own body. She described hovering calmly above the scene below her before a warm, golden light appeared at her shoulder.
We were in an accident caused by another horse, a runaway horse, and she flipped over backwards, fell off a hill, immediately, unexpectedly left my body, and I found myself 30, 40 feet up in the air looking down at my body.
Standing within it was a figure she recognized instantly, not from prior belief she had been raised in an atheist household, but from something deeper that needed no explanation. She said his eyes held a joy that made looking away impossible.
He was a man. I knew he was more than a man, but he appeared to be a man, but he was a perfect man. I always say I couldn't look away from his face. His face was the most important thing because of the joy and the love coming from his eyes. I did not want to look away from his face.
He showed her moments from her life, one by one, and in each of them, she could see that she had never been as alone as she had felt. She came back from that experience carrying a certainty she has never been able to set down. Final visitor.
What is amazing, Mom? Can you see this little pink girl here?
While a man was filming his terminally ill mother when she said something that made him stop completely.
Can you see this little pink girl here?
She spoke clearly to someone he couldn't see a pink girl present in the room with her, visible only to her. He panned the camera and found nothing. People approaching the end of their lives have described these moments across cultures and centuries. Familiar figures appearing at the bedside, sometimes recognized, sometimes not, always described as calm and comforting. Whether the pink girl was a childhood companion, a spiritual presence, or something his mother's mind constructed to ease the crossing, she arrived exactly when she was needed.
A pink girl?
You can't.
No, I can't see the pink girl.
Annie's Angel. On June 9th, 2018, 9-year-old Annie Powell nearly drowned. She was placed in a coma while doctors worked, and her family, friends, and church community kept a continuous vigil of prayer. 5 days later, Annie woke up and was well enough to go home, a recovery her medical team described as remarkable. What her family couldn't stop talking about was what she remembered from those 5 days. She described a place filled with soft light and colorful butterflies, a feeling of love so complete it had no edges.
I saw butterflies, and they are all different colors. They weren't just regular, everyday colors.
And a calm man in white who had been with her in the water, gentle, unhurried, and present from the very beginning.
There was the man in white who was helping me in the pool, and I think maybe it was Jesus or maybe an angel.
Gettysburg Shadows. In 2023, a man driving through Gettysburg at night with his family pointed his camera out the window when shapes appeared near the old cemetery. Figures were moving across the road, running, grouped together, following a path along the tree line before disappearing into the dark. Gettysburg holds the weight of 3 days in July 1863, when over 50,000 soldiers and thousands of horses were lost in a single battle. Visitors to the site have documented unexplained sounds, phantom drumbeats, and voices in empty fields for decades. The footage added one more account to a place that has never fully released what happened there. Monitor flatlines. Nurses watching a critical patient on the monitor feed noticed something shift in the image above the bed. A shadowy shape appeared to rise slowly from the patient's body and drift away from the frame. The clip was shared widely, drawing immediate debate about lens, artifacts, and insects near the camera. Then people noticed the timestamp. The shape appeared and moved in the seconds directly before the heart monitor flatlined. Not after, not simultaneously, but before. Whatever interpretation fits most comfortably, the sequence of events on that recording is difficult to reorder. Something left that room, and the monitor confirmed it moments later. The girl in white.
Yo, me and Eon seen this walking through the cemetery.
From his balcony in Arizona, a man spotted a young barefoot girl in white moving silently through the cemetery across from his home. He and a friend called out to her. She didn't turn, didn't pause, didn't acknowledge them at all, just continued walking deeper into the grounds until she was gone. No turn, no gap in the fence, no path that led anywhere, just gone. Neighbors who heard the description recognized it immediately. A girl matching that account had lived near that cemetery years ago and, according to local accounts, was never properly laid to rest. The belief in the area is that she's still looking for something she didn't find before she left.
She's not coming back. Nigga, she's gone. Where the did she go?
Charlotte's glimpse.
I'd had a stroke about 8 years ago, and my blood pressure, I went to my heart doctor, and my blood pressure was 234 over 130.
Charlotte Holmes went in for a routine medical checkup and left with something she has spent years trying to put into words. Her blood pressure spiked suddenly, and as doctors worked, she found herself floating above the room, watching them move around her body. A floral scent arrived first, then music she described as the most beautiful sound she had ever heard. She was guided through what she understood as heaven gardens, radiant light, relatives who had passed, and a joy so complete it had no comparison. Then God showed her something else, a place dark and painful beyond what she could fully describe. She was pulled back before she could process it, and she has been sharing the account ever since.